Our primary mission here at Alternate Media is to bridge the gap between Judaism and Christianity, as it's existed for far too long. Yeshua, as we know, never intended to start a new religion. He was a religious Jew.
I think that's a certain point in every believer's life where we think, isn't there more?
There has definitely been a need within the church. It's something that a lot of Christians are searching for. A lot of Christians know that there is something missing in their faith. And what indeed is intended to fill that is Judaic roots of the faith.
The New Testament is very clear about bridging the gap between Jew and Gentile, and we're just returning that mission back to the modern day.
Shalomi, my homies. It's good to be back in the studio. It's good to be back and able to speak to all of you and spend time with all of you, especially in the chat. Please engage in the chat. Today's topic is going to be something that probably a lot of people have very mixed opinions on. You know, nationalism. Is it biblical? Is it unbiblical? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What would Jesus's opinion on that have been? So that's what we'll be discussing today. Without further ado, let me bring up my co-host.
What's up?
What's up, bro?
Shalomi, my homie.
Yeah, it's been forever since we've done that.
Yeah, it has. I've kind of forgot about it. A lot's happened in the last year.
Yeah, we gotta get back to some of our old classic gags, you know.
That, and we need to get that just reminds me to get back in touch with the church split with Will Hess.
Dude, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, which actually, so, you know, on that note, very quickly, for those of you who follow us, who also follow them, they've gone through some changes, and Will is going to be readdressing a lot of the topics that he has previously addressed, because some of those videos are no longer on YouTube. So, yeah, keep up with them. Definitely, if you don't follow the church split, please go give them a follow. Excellent YouTube channel. And we hope to do more with Will also. I know he and I are going to be doing another discussion on magic and witchcraft on his channel at some point. We still have to make that happen, but it's in the plan.
It's in the book. He's injured right now. He's got a kid. He recently broke his ankle, I think.
Did get injured, man.
Yeah.
He had the worst luck.
Poor guy. But anyway, before we get started with tonight's topic, who is doing?
Whoa, hold on.
Whoa.
Hold on. He stole that from us.
Digital Pastor Jim uses Shalomi, my homies?
Yes.
No, he stole that from us. Yeah, that's our thing. Well,
Yes.
Really, it was my thing. I just kind of let it go.
Right.
Yeah,
I borrowed it because we are the same person, and I own it by proxy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess legally. But we did that a long time. Anyway, before we get started into the topic, who is here with you in spirits?
Ooh, so I have finally finished. This is the last bit of the Mother Earth rye bourbon.
Oh.
Yeah, finally I'm done with that bottle. This is the last little bit of it. And then, you know, as my beer companion for it, I'm doing just a traditional Yuengling, America's oldest brewery, because 4th of July was this past week, so I had to get a good American beer.
Fair. And for me, I got a little bit left of this Bushmills 16 year.
Ooh.
So I'm going to top it off, I think, today, because, you know, the holiday. How often do you get to drink a 16-year-old Bushmills?
Fact.
And then, of course, for me, and there's barely anything left, for me, my beer companion, because we don't have Yuengling out here on the West Coast, sadly, Coors.
Also a good American beer.
Also, particularly the yellow
preferable than I'd prefer that over Bud Light.
For obvious reasons. I will not be drinking any Bud Light or Bud Light affiliated beers on the channel or at any official capacity for any reason.
Reasons other than the taste.
reasons other than I wasn't. That's what's funny is I wasn't drinking it before, and then the thing happened, and I was like, I'm just gonna
Well,
keep
I'm
doing what
definitely
I'm
not
doing. No change. Yeah. All right. So
So the topic, right?
national.
Especially we're in an election year, so this always becomes a topic around election years, especially in the past, the most recent two elections, right? This whole idea of nationalism, and it gets a lot of vitriol in the media, right? In particular, we talk about nationalism like that's just this terrible thing, particularly Christian nationalism, and how that's its own thing. And that might even be a separate discussion. We're kind of just addressing nationalism in general, but they are related.
Yeah, we might brush over it, but not really. We're more or less talking about like your good old fashioned, pretty typical nationalism, I think, today, but with a twist, with a biblical focus, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the first thing we need to do is kind of really what is nationalism. We should kind of go forward with what it even is before we kind of keep going, in order to help better distinguish it from the Christian nationalism, which, you know, is its own topic.
Right.
So,
right. Which I think one of my bigger problems with that too is like a lot of what people label as Christian nationalism is actually just like old-fashioned patriotism.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, should Christian churches be singing, you know, "Proud to be an American" as part of their worship service? That might be going a bit far.
Yeah, maybe not part of the worship service. I mean, but maybe just as an I could see it kind of going both ways. I can see it being as part of a appreciation for the nation that you live in, and in a sense, sort of praying for the nation that you're in, because in any Jewish synagogue, Orthodox synagogue, there is a special like time carved out of the worship service, the prayer service, to specifically pray for the nation you live in. And it comes right out of the book of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah is told, you're going into exile, but pray for the nation that you live in exile, because you're going to be living there. So, yeah. And pray for their success. Your success will be based on their success and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I could see, it would be weird, but I could see that being, you know, an appreciation moment for, I guess, the nation you live in.
Right. So I'm with you. I could understand it. I think it kind of edges a little close to, I think, being similar to like singing "Oh Christmas Tree."
Yeah. Again, like I said, it'd be weird because you're like, again, part of the worship service, maybe not, but having, I don't know, it's like singing the national anthem before a sporting event, maybe, you know, like,
right.
If it were something a little bit closer to that, and not like you just got done singing, you know, "I Speak Jesus," right, the song, and then you roll right into, you know, "God Bless
Proud to
America,"
be an American,
you know, as part of in the same key, you know.
Right. Yeah, no Toby Keith in the worship service. But Toby Keith is awesome. But yeah, no, I think if you are an American Christian and you are not patriotic, I think you might actually miss you might actually miss the point of America in general, right? You know, I think you might miss the point of what the founders were fighting for, and I know that there's a lot of dispute over those who were Freemasons and whatnot. There's a whole discussion. Matter of fact, we may have another discussion on the religious perspectives of the founders, because even I would say even some of the hard right Christian conservatives who spout off how the founders were all Christian men, the Christian that they mean is not the same Christian that the founders were. And we can have a whole other discussion on that, and we should. But be that as it may, right? The founders established the nation because of biblical values, right? It was Judeo-Christian values that it was built on, and so if you're not at least a little bit proud of what they accomplished and what they established, then I think you might miss the point. But that again, we're kind of beside the point here. Nationalism in general, all right. Do you have a dictionary definition?
I don't, but you know what? I
was going to say that's I find useful to start with. Okay, what is the dictionary definition of nationalism?
Yeah. So the standard dictionary, Oxford language, identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment. I'm an idiot. I've actually never seen that spelled out. I've used that word so many times.
Be the sound of the wind.
It's the sound of the wind. Exclusion or detriment. Yeah. Of the interests of other nations. So identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. The detriment part, that's going to be a little interesting, I think. That's the dictionary definition, but that's not how I would put that necessarily in my definition.
I am actually very okay with that definition, and I think that has to be framed within the proper contextual understanding. Okay, this is where, especially among Christian nationalists, you get a lot of hate against those people who are very America first. But America is where we live, right? That's where we live, and American interest should be primary, right? First, before the interest of any other nation, because we don't live there, right? My support for my family's interest within my home comes before I worry about the interest of the person who lives across the street. Okay? That is perfectly natural and perfectly normal. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean I don't care about that person's interests. It means that they are not their interests are not my primary concern. And if I am placed in a situation where I have to choose between where there is going to be detriment, okay? It doesn't matter what it is. There will be detriment on one side or the other, okay? It's an either or situation, right? Kobayashi Maru, there's no way around it. There will be detriment. And I have to choose detriment to my family or detriment to their family. I'm choosing their family every time. I'm not going to willingly choose detriment to my family, okay? So I'm perfectly fine with that phrasing. That is how everybody should be about their own nation, okay?
Yeah. I mean, I can see there are obviously ways where there doesn't have to necessarily be detriment. Now,
right.
If there's war, if it's like the war on terrorism, yeah.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like in a scenario where there doesn't have to be, right? Where there can be mutual benefit, there should be mutual benefit, right? We should work together. But in a situation where it's unavoidable, and you have the choice between detriment to you or detriment to them, every man to a man who has a family will say, I choose detriment to them, right? It's the same thing. Honestly, this is the same decision that soldiers make in combat.
Yeah.
Okay? It's your life or their life. That is the choice that you have. You don't have another choice. And every soldier who pulls the trigger is choosing their life.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can agree with that. I think the detriment for sure for certain nations that should not exist. Now, that another thing about nationalism is you're sort of picking a team. You're sort of picking and not picking. So nationalism in the sense that you're born in a certain nation. We happen to be Americans, or you choose, right, to be a part of the family of another nation, such as the cases with our fathers, actually.
Yes.
You are picking the good guys. It's like it's not really any different from picking any sports team. and running some numbers, running the data, and picking the team that you can appreciate the most, or agree with the most in their particular whatever it might be, strategy, whatever. Or it might just, for most people, teams are like, well, I was born in Atlanta, so I like the Atlanta Braves or whatever. But yeah, it's really no different. You're just kind of picking a team. You're siding with who you want to win, more or less. And not every nation has to be at war with each other. Fine, especially when nations are, in peace treaties. You should be able to support one another without any real vitriol, like, jesting and kind of playing at each other, like the French surrender all the time. Well, they're our allies, right? We can dog them like that if we want to. But yeah, there is in the world, no matter how you slice it, nationalism is how you build that team cohesion that's needed to defeat evil nations in the world. So if you're anti-nationalism, but you're pro the good guys, well, then you're not anti-nationalism. You have to pick a side. And even if it's a nation you don't belong to, but you happen to belong to the evil nation, you're going to have to make a decision and choose a side. Nationalism is essentially, you're kind of choosing good and evil.
Right.
So the detriment thing I can see, especially for situations like that. If you're look at Israel today.
Yeah, well, so that's exactly where I was going to go, is because I don't think people really recognize that that dispute is one of nationalism on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It is on both sides. If you are pro-Palestinian, then you are a Palestinian nationalist.
Yeah.
Okay. You support them as a nation to the exclusion and detriment of the nation of Israel.
And that's whether or not
vice versa. That is an exact either or situation where really you're choosing one or the other because one side refuses to coexist peacefully.
Right. In that particular case, that's true. And this is true even if you're not a Palestinian. If you're just a Palestinian supporter, that makes you a Palestinian. You're choosing the Palestinian team, as it were. That makes you a Palestinian nationalist. And that means you support the detriment of other nations that oppose them, that they oppose as well.
And even associating that with pride actually kind of even...
That's a whole
that's like further cement, like, because you're literally attaching pride to Palestinian nationalism, which, like, how do we not make that connection?
Anyway, but yeah, that's the case. Nationalism is just being proud, and also, and this is kind of the big part, it's really showing an appreciation for a particular nation in a certain way. So if you're from that nation and you can objectively look back at the nation that you are from and do one of two things: yeah, we're the good guys, or you might not be the goodest guys, say you're in a different nation or whatever. However you view that, there's still an appreciation that needs to come with, well, this nation did raise me. I am part of this culture. They brought me up. Yes, your parents brought you up in this nation, and there's a certain support structure that comes with that. And so there's an appreciation. It's a little bit of I wouldn't say think of it like a tax, but kind of think of it like, in a sense, if that's the nation that you're from and they support you, so you choose to support them, well, part of that is having a sense of patriotism for that. It shows your appreciation for living in the nation that you chose to be in, if you chose to be there. I choose America. I want to be very clear about that. I've lived in many nations. I've been to many countries. I choose America. So I have a sense of American pride. The Padres are the team of the military. So that's why I wore my Padres hat today.
Nice. Yeah, and I would agree. Me here, especially, my father coming from the nation that he came from, It's not to say that we are not proud of that heritage, right? There's a cultural inheritance that comes with having lineage from somewhere else.
Right.
But the beauty of America is that you can come here and you can be American, right? You can be part of the culture. You can be part of what makes America America. And yeah, no, I choose America every time. But what would Jesus think about nationalism?
So this is where we get into, is nationalism unbiblical? Because I heard this a lot from many Christians, that being an American nationalist, a patriot, is in many ways unbiblical. And I think that comes from a good place, but it's more than wrong. It's like, it's almost opposing to the gospel message, in fact.
Right.
And
It's tell you what, it comes from a place of and I'm going to say this is going to be offensive. It comes from a place of being so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good.
I love
Right?
that phrase.
It comes from that place of like, well, I'm a citizen of heaven, right? This place is not my home. You know, it's you hear a lot of that kind of jargon thrown around, and so because this world is not my home, and like I'm a citizen of heaven. People take this idea like, well, you just shouldn't have any national ties, right? You shouldn't have any loyalty to any particular nation because you're supposed to be in the world and not of the world, and a lot of Christianese gets thrown around.
Yeah.
And people seem to just forget that, like, okay, that's fine, but we don't live there yet. We live here, and we still have to behave here and act here in a way that will affect positive change here.
And that's so a key proponent of it. I'm going to put this banner up. Nationalism is the gospel message. If you actually take a very careful look at what the gospel is, and not just, Jesus came, he died, buried 3 days, rose, ascended, like that's the gospel, but the meaning of the word gospel, evangelion in Greek, or besora in Hebrew, they actually have real meanings other than just that shortened version of a story from the gospels that we've come to know. The gospel, the good news, is nationalism. It is the full and total restoration of Israel at its rightful place as the center of the world, as the kingdom of earth, with the Messiah as its king. It's nationalism. The whole gospel message, especially, you see more of this in Luke. Luke, I think, feels a little bit more keen on focusing on the nationalist aspect of the gospel, because he's the one who records things like Jesus weeping over the city of Jerusalem, knowing that it's going to fall. The people constantly asking him, when are you going to restore Israel? Now's not my time. But to a Jew in the Hebrew like mindset, the gospel, the good news, the Besora is nationalism. It's when Israel is fully restored back to its former glory, and then we enter into a messianic era.
It is, if let me phrase it this way, because if you read through the prophets and you read through Revelation, it is the restoration and benefit of Israel to the exclusion and detriment of other nations.
That's very true. Actually, that's spot on. Actually, that's good. That's good. Man, that all right, show over. You guys have a good night.
I mean, you can't escape that. You cannot escape that. The entire end times narrative that people understand is that it is the restoration of Israel with Messiah reigning as king. The bringing back into the fold the lost tribes, hence the restoration. That is the restoration, right? Not just the expansion of the borders, by the way, right? It's the expansion of the borders to the full, the full extent that God showed Abraham, right? Mm-hmm. Which has never been the case. It's never been the case in Israel's history. Has it ever actually extended that far? So it is the expansion of Israel's borders beyond anything that the world has ever actually seen. It is the bringing in of the lost tribes. That is the restoration. It is Messiah reigning king as a monarch over this nation And it is the other nations being judged for having persecuted Israel
to the exclusion
and living subservient to Israel.
and if refusing to live in certain subservience, having
Or judgment.
detriment as in judgment, right? Lack of rain and such as a result. It's all throughout the prophets. It's essentially the focus of the prophets is the bringing back together, the reunification of Israel. Something that I think is really lost on a lot of Christians is that since basically immediately after Solomon, Israel has never been unified. Once Solomon, once power passes from him, the kingdom is divided immediately, and that's the whole messianic prophecy is a looking forward to that reunification. After the disunification, the kingdom split in half. One of them gets taken up entirely and absorbed into pagan nations, and then you have the Babylonian exile shortly thereafter. And it's just never been unified. And every prophet since then is always saying, "Don't worry, God's got this. Unification is at the door. Wait for it. The Messiah will come and restore everything. Just be patient." Stay steadfast, remain faithful. Like that's the message of the prophets.
Think about that. I feel like the reason for that is because the mission of Messiah, as can be derived from the prophets, right? From what we read in the prophets, the mission of Messiah unfortunately, in a large part of Christianity, has been reduced to Isaiah 53, right? And that's pretty much all there is. And it's this idea of global redemption for all sin. And then that's where it stops. But like the overwhelming majority of what the prophets write about Messiah actually doesn't have to do with that. It has everything to do with being a nationalist hero.
Yeah.
That is the point of Messiah, is to be an Israeli nationalist hero.
It's like 90% that, and only 10% what Jesus actually did accomplish when he was here on the earth. That's only 10% of the gospel message. The other 90% is still yet to be fulfilled. I mean, just read Revelation. There's still a lot to come.
Right.
But read any of it. Don't even read Revelation. You don't need Revelation to see what's to come. Reading just the prophets alone, you really get a sense for there's a lot left undone. And it's all to do with Israeli nationalism. And to continue with this point, once again, part of being a believer, Messianic Jew, Christian, doesn't matter. The prayer should be, as the master put it, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." So when it comes to nationalism here on the more earthly, there's your citizenship in heaven. But part of being a nationalist here where you are is trying to do your best to bring the kingdom of heaven down where you are. And the only way to do that is with teamwork. And if you have a sense of patriotism and nationalism, you guys can get behind the same goal and work together to accomplish the goal of helping to bring heaven down, to bring the kingdom here. And the only way to do that is with a sense of nationalism for your own nation, to help be the change that nation needs in order to be part of the bigger picture of the Messianic era. So that kind of brings us to this two nationalisms concept I kind of wanted to talk about. Because we've talked about on the show before, you have two souls in Judaism. You have
right.
Your Nefesh and your Neshama. You have a sort of earthly living soul, and then you have this heavenly godly soul, right? And the two are meant to work together, but they often find themselves at odds. If you're not a believer, they usually find themselves at odds, or one is being suppressed by the other. In this case, I would say that you can use that as a sort of picture or an archetype of how it should be working on a national level. Your citizenship is in heaven. You belong to the kingdom of Israel in a heavenly way, but that doesn't mean you give up everything in your earthly, domain. You are responsible for tikkun olam, repairing the world around you, and that does require a sense of pride in where you're at and working on it. And it's nationalism. There are two nationalisms, just like your body has two souls, and they should be working together in tandem. And yeah, for those of you, I can hear it now. Well, the nefesh is often like the Yetzer Hara, right? It's like the bad soul. Not necessarily. That's not the Yetzer Hara and the nefesh are not the same thing. The nefesh is your more earthly animal soul, and it's the soul that's required for you to understand why you're hungry, to feed yourself. It's your instinct. It's that the reflexes that you have on the road when you're driving. That's your nefesh, right?
Right.
You need that as much as you need your neshama.
The nefesh is the doorway of opportunity through which the Yetzer Hara works, right? Hunger, feeling bodily hunger is not a bad thing, okay? And
Right.
therefore, satisfying that bodily hunger is not a bad thing. It is necessary to live, and you have to live in order to be able to make a positive change, right? To do things that will affect a positive change, to further the kingdom that you belong to, right? That's a necessity. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, takes that necessity, right, as an opportunity to entice gluttony,
Right.
not even gluttony, or even just unclean eating.
Yeah. Or in a sense, even envy. Kind of giving into the overeating in a sense. It can be with anything, but anything that's good that your nefesh needs, the Yetzer Hara uses that as an opportunity to tempt you to overindulge in whatever that thing might be.
Right.
Yeah, and everything in moderation, we say. But I mean, even then, to a certain extent, on Shabbat, you're meant to actually enjoy some of the earthly things on Shabbat.
Yes.
Just as an example. So there's a balance, but that's the nefesh and the Yetzer Hara, not the same thing. So that's a distinguishment we should definitely be making.
And I would say that is the balance, and that that moderation is the point where if your America First attitude is an America First attitude where you would seek to intentionally cause detriment to another nation, that is the point at which that nationalism has become a bad thing.
Okay? Intentionally, without just cause, I would say, right?
Right.
I intentionally joined the military to intentionally help end certain nations that are a threat to good people. That's very intentional.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, America has no qualms with Canada. I mean, other than philosophical ones, but we're at peace with one another, right? So, if your brand of America First was one to imperialize Canada and then, inflict utter harm and starvation and whatnot on those people in that cause, then yes, that is a bad nationalism. But as long as your nationalism is like, hey, we can be at peace and we can peaceably disagree and even try and help one another where we can, since we are at peace with one another. But as an American, I still prefer it living over here, and I think that life here is preferable to life over there. Then that's not a bad, right? That's not a bad nationalism.
Again, you're essentially choosing teams, but always choose a good guy team and be appreciative of the nation. Like I have a very strong sense of Irish nationalism with me. We're at peace with Ireland anyway, and we have a lot of each nation has their faults. But again, I've chosen America as being my primary sense of patriotic nationalism. I have a lot to be appreciative of the freedoms I have here that are not afforded to me in other countries. So
an interesting question of historical philosophy.
What's that?
We don't have to discuss this here because this is something that would definitely get a video demonetized and probably kicked off if we got into a deep discussion about it. But maybe if we were to start a more politically inclined show where we discuss politics a little more so than theology. The war between the states. Which side were the nationalists?
Oh, okay. Actually,
which ones were the nationalists?
I mean, they were both kind of nationalists in their own right.
Right.
But one was more of a statist nationalist.
And there's a difference. You can be a nationalist without being a statist. Statism is always bad. Lay that out on the table.
How about this? If you guys want to see a political side of Alternate Media podcast, put it in the chat.
Right, yeah, give us votes. Do you want us to do a political show?
And I mean, hey, if it gets enough push, I don't see why not.
I'm down.
And then the last thing I think I want to touch on before we call it a night, we do want to keep the show shorter moving forward in the future. So, but the last thing about nationalism, I'll say, and this circles a little bit back to the main gospel message, because again, the gospel message is Israeli nationalism. Now, this particular problem is addressed by Paul, because for Jews that's easy. Israeli nationalism is sort of in their blood, right? They kind of came out of Israel, even if they weren't born there. They have a close connection with Israel. What do we do about Gentiles? They don't really have that same sense of nationalism, Israeli sort of citizenship identification, right, that would automatically come with being born and raised a Jew. Paul's answer to this is, consider yourself a member of the nation of Israel. And he doesn't say the kingdom of heaven. He actually says the nation of Israel. He's talking specifically about Israeli nationalism. And that comes right out of Romans chapter 11.
Yep. And we have done a whole video on this explaining, but suffice it to say, Paul is talking about this tree that some of the branches were broken off so that Gentiles could be grafted in. That tree is Israel. That there really isn't an argument to be made otherwise. The video that we did about this chapter, where we discuss it in length, we address most every contention that you might hear regarding that. But there really isn't an argument to be made. It's very obvious that Paul is talking about Israel when he's talking about this tree.
Yeah, context, again, like Wave Top's overview, he's talking about Israel as a people. The whole chapter 11 is dedicated to Israel not being rejected. Again, the gospel message is nationalist. And part of the mystery of the gospel is Gentile inclusion, because as far as Israel is concerned, if you look at Jeremiah, the gospel is only addressed to Israel and to Judah. It's not for the nations. It's not for the Gentiles. So Paul needs to reassure the Gentiles that, one, conversion is not necessary, because as far as Israel is concerned, you have to be Israelite in order for the gospel to apply to you. Read the prophets. You won't see anywhere where Gentiles are included. You'll see hints of it, right, throughout, like maybe Jonah. Jonah is a really good example of like the hint, but the promises are made for Israel. So many of the Israelis were, at the time, were trying to convince Gentiles to fully convert so that their salvation would be legitimized as an actual citizen. So Paul writes Romans 11 to assure them that that's not necessary, that their citizenship is still with Israel, and that they're grafted in a certain way.
Right.
It's a much more spiritual, right? It's less physically Israel, but he's telling them, physical or not, consider yourself Israeli. And I've said this in the past: if you don't consider yourself as part of an Israeli citizen, whether they accept you or not, if you don't consider yourself as part of the Israelite kingdom, then the whole gospel message doesn't really apply to you. You kind of put your own salvation at risk at that point. I mean, obviously only God can judge, and that's not going to be the case. I'm not saying, but you know what I mean? Like it's that important that Paul spent
that is the
time on
point.
the topic. Yeah.
Because there was no other covenant made with any other people.
Right.
The new covenant in Jeremiah 31 is made with the house of Israel and the house of Judah.
So if you're not Israeli,
that's it.
Well then, okay. So what covenant are you part of?
Right.
Even my New Testament teacher at Liberty University, Dr. Love, he said that once. I asked him, I went to his house to help him with his bike one day, his motorcycle. And he had a mezuzah and everything, and the ram's horn, Hanukkah, everything. And I was like, hey, if I didn't know any better, I would have thought you were Jewish. I am a Messianic Jew at the time, so I to identify these things. And he's my New Testament teacher at Liberty University, and he, through his own words, said, Well, according to the New Testament, we're all Israel. And I was like, this guy knows. That's true. Like, that's, you consider yourself to be part of that citizenship. It's not just the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is Israeli. That's just the way that it is. You're not meant to live in heaven. That's not the gospel message. You're not supposed to go to heaven. You're supposed to bring heaven down here in the form of the kingdom of Israel, which Messiah will rebuild with the temple, and he will reign over the other nations from Israel as an Israelite monarch. And then you get into the monarchy, into that nation via him. That's the salvation message.
I think that's something that maybe the the Crusade age church almost understood, right? During the time of the Crusades, they even referred to Jerusalem as the kingdom of heaven, right? But they were talking about the landmass, which is why they felt that they had the right as the church to own it and rule over it. They weren't quite understanding that it's not necessarily just talking about the landmass. It is something bigger than the dirt, right?
Yeah.
So they almost got it, but not quite.
America's kind of same. America is not a piece of land. It's an idea.
Yep. And I think anybody who didn't grasp that when we saw the recent what was it? Was it in Hong Kong?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yep. Hong Kong, where all of those people were singing the national anthem and waving American flags. That's the evidence that you need right there that America is not a piece of dirt, right? Yeah. America is the set of values that embody from the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. That can be applied in any nation, and anybody, anywhere can aspire to that. Yep. I would say that those people in Hong Kong clearly understood that.
And those aspirations are tikkun olam. They are repairing the world around them by standing up to tyranny and standing up against evil to put goodness in its place. That is tikkun olam. That's part of the gospel message. Bring heaven down. You're responsible for helping to do that.
Yep.
So nationalism, yeah. I mean, obviously, anything in the extreme is bad, but nationalism is biblical.
Yep. Jesus was a nationalist.
Yes, he was in fact a nationalist.
Not just a nationalist, but like he was a nationalist hero.
Yeah, and the Messiah was always viewed as being someone who will be a nationalist hero.
Yep.
And when he comes back, he will do nationalist things, very nationalist things. He will be the George Washington of Israel at that point.
Attacking enemies on Christmas Eve.
Oh
boy!
See it? Like he celebrates anyway. He was going to do it.
Yeah, he would be celebrating Hanukkah, the holiday that doesn't celebrate him.
Well, all right. Anyway. I think we should wrap it up. Yep. We've gone over anyway.
So, we've gone over. We are really trying to get back in the swing of things. It has been a little difficult with the distance and with conflict of schedules, but we are really working hard to try and get back in the swing of things, bring you guys more content. Don't forget that we do have a Discord that is open for discussion for everybody. It's pretty well self-moderated. People are pretty cordial on there in general. We also have a book.
Yes.
And so it's
link in the description below.
Yep. Definitely get the book. It's good. It has a lot of good content. I like it.
It's super good. I'm rereading it. It's so good. I wrote half of it.
Yep. So yeah, definitely get the book. Hit the like and subscribe button if you like this content. You want to see more content like this. Again, submit votes for whether or not you want us to. Maybe we should do like an actual poll on the Discord. How many people want us to do actual political content? Maybe have a show that veers a little bit more Daily Wire-esque in its nature.
I would actually love to do that.
I think it would be awesome.
But yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. that being said, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, ring the bell. We love all of you. And now that the 4th is over, man, we're looking towards the fall feasts here shortly.
Yeah, well, now we're in the summer time, so the long holidayless summer is ahead of us, which is nice. I get most of my work done in the summer because there's no holidays. So
right. So anyway, that being said, we hope that you have enjoyed this. We hope that it has taught you something, or at least provoked some thought, and definitely hope that it has blessed you if your soul was so inclined to receive. And we hope to see you next time. All things said and considered, L'chaim.
L'chaim.